Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So Art, thank you so much. We understand that you are running for mayor of New York City, and we're just pleased to have Priscilla join us. She's leading the cannabis industry and she's taken over. And, as a co-founder of Original Breeders League and a part of Oxford University, the state of cannabis, she's just been all over. And also she's an advisor for Sunday Place and someone that I consider a sister and a family member, just an amazing friend of ours. And so it's an honor to bring you guys together to talk about not only cannabis, but the industry itself and how it's transforming, and then what you stand for and the humanity that you present as a candidate for mayor of New York. I think it's just a really timed conversation. So Priscilla, Art, please introduce yourself and a little bit further than I've already explained.
Well, I think you did an amazing job, Mike. The point is that I am in the plant medicine space for cannabis and psychedelics. And I've been in this space fighting for patients' rights for nearly two decades now, because of a close personal story with a family member who was sick. And I started with that and haven't stopped since. But I'm very honored and very excited to be here with you, Art, Mr. Art Chang, AKA Cheech and Chang, here with us at SMP. I love it, love it, love it. Please, Art, tell us more about you. You are fascinating, and just your leadership role and what you represent in New York is so powerful.
Thank you so much. I'm just delighted to be here, and so great to be here talking about this really important topic. And I think it's like this kind of, for me, it's a little bit like talking about the arts, where people think of it as being this frivolous thing, but it's actually a very deep thing and profound. It has lots of impact across all the everything that we touch, from health to education to economic development. So I'm really honored to be here and speaking with you. So thank you so much. So I'm Art Chang. I'm a candidate for mayor for New York City. I believe the problems in New York City are solvable, and that New York City has an opportunity to be a place where everybody belongs and where differences are celebrated. And to do that, we have to have a city which is built on equity and restorative justice. And people look at the problems, they think that they're so difficult, but really the connections between them, the interconnections between the problems, is what gives us a clue to actually solving them. So I'm super excited to be able to bring that to the table here and be able to provide for the city my ideas for how we can solve the city's problems and be able to build a better city that is more inclusive, that lifts everybody up from the bottom up, and be able to include everybody and meet everybody where they are. So just to kind of like, maybe I'll come in a short kind of intro to why cannabis is a major issue for me. And it's going to start in a very unusual place. I was born in 1963 in Jim Crow, Atlanta, and I grew up in an all-white school district in Ohio. And I suffered racial violence outside of my home, but also grew up in a domestic violence household. And what I learned from that was that, it was very lucky that there was no gun in my house, because I wouldn't be sitting here today. But I also know that if you don't actually, have a way to express your anger out externally, you often take your anger out internally. And so I tried to commit suicide when I was in high school. I used substances as a way to numb the pain that I was feeling. I smoked way too much pot in high school. If I smoked so much pot in high school that by the time I got to college, I actually had an almost allergic reaction to the pot. And so I actually don't smoke anymore. But I totally understand, what it means to need to have relief from, either mental pain that you're experiencing or physical pain that you're experiencing. I was burned when I was 2 years old, and I had 14 years of reconstructive surgery. I know what it's like to feel physical pain as well. And so I look at kind of where we are today, and the ability to use, pot, marijuana, weed, cannabis, whatever, there's so many use of terms in use, is right now we're in a profound place because we have an opportunity to use this as a method for restorative justice, to think about how we take this economic opportunity and be able to diversify the people who have access to that opportunity, beginning with people who paid the ultimate price for it, right? The people who have been incarcerated, right? And then use the tax proceeds to be able to benefit families and communities who have been devastated by arrests for this thing that should never have been illegal in the first place. So I have lots of ideas around, how we build a cannabis industry in New York City with equity and restorative justice. So I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing, very intimately your past, and, people who have suffered understand and can see and recognize when others are suffering. It's a way for us to really develop our compassion and, the ability to take action when we do see others suffering around us. So social injustice is something that is very, very important to me as well. Just erasing the stigma around this plant. A lot of people don't understand that the war on drugs wasn't the war on drugs, it was a war on people. And this is something that we really have to change. And it starts now. Now, with this plant, for the first time ever in history, we are breaking doors down. We are creating brand new things that were never even, it wasn't even thought of as a possibility before. For example, the National Cannabis Party. The National Cannabis Party is really interesting. It is actually the first ever electoral party registered with the FEC.
Wow.
So the NCP got their registration number, I believe, back in January. And this is a perfect way to introduce my colleague. I myself have recently joined the NCP team, and I function as their esteemed president, helping them to navigate through. I've been in legislation, and I've written and helped a lot of different countries develop their industry, the cannabis industry, whether it's in South America to some countries in Europe. And now here in the US, we have an opportunity. It's a new party just getting started, but I also have my dear colleague. Her name is Sephida Artis. She's joining us today from, I believe, Virginia, who, by the way, just legalized, if I'm not mistaken. And Sephida is the National Director for NCP. Welcome, Sephida. Please meet Mr. Art Chang, the NYC mayoral candidate. We're talking about his cannabis policies and how he feels about social injustice.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate being here. I'm very happy to be here. And I am actually originally from New York, so I'm from Brooklyn. So you're right there in my hometown, and I am excited about New York. I was one of those people jumping up and down, like, yeah, we did it. So definitely happy to be here and to talk with you guys, and it's an honor.
So I want to give, a special recognition to Sephida. Sephida is also a canna mommy who has found tremendous benefits in treating her daughter and using it herself. She has a great story as well, and we're just very happy. But her beautiful hair, you notice that it's 2 different colors. And Sephida, I would love for you to share, why is it that you have chosen these colors?
Sure. So as Priscilla said, I am a canna mom and I am a caregiver. I have a 3-year-old daughter. Her name is Kanza, and Kanza was born with a critical congenital heart defect. that required her to have reconstructive heart surgery as a newborn, and also a second heart surgery that led to a full heart transplant at 5 months old. Yes, congenital heart disease is a lot more common than what most people know. I had no idea what it was. I found out when I was 7 months pregnant. And so the ribbon for CHD awareness is blue and red. So I literally, people wear their hearts on their sleeves. I wear it in my hair as well. So I felt like it's something I wanted to do to commemorate all that she's gone through and all the children that I have come across and the mothers that I have had the pleasure of building relationships with, to build awareness, and to also, as a Canna mom, be able to tell my experience when it comes to using CBD and being able to help my daughter thrive and grow to where she is now. She's been doing extremely well. And I just would like it to be more clinical research done so that there can be access for pediatric patients as well. I think it's really important for that to be made available for children, especially being that there are moms who have had very great experiences with their children. So as an advocate for them, and just being an advocate all around, even in this cannabis space, I would love to see that happen. Absolutely.
We are all patients here. And Art, I would love for you to maybe talk a little bit about some of your, you're talking about patients' rights and patient access, and, having the ability to find relief mentally and physically from different pains. Art, I was able to kind of look into some of your points and some of the things that you stand behind on mental health issues, and how does your policies support mental health issues and also the access in cannabis?
Well, I'll start off by saying that that when we talk about health in our society, we actually don't mean health. We mean illness. So we don't really have health care. We have illness care. We don't have mental health care. We have mental illness care. And so because we're not oriented toward this more positive, holistic definition of where we want to go, we're focused on always treating the symptoms of these problems instead of starting at the root. And of course, this feeds an enormous industry, right, which is built up to address these issues. So we need to completely change the paradigm. And I think we're in a moment where we can do that. When it comes to think about mental health in particular, there's no kind of concrete definition for being healthy, right? Like everybody talks about it as if you either have mental health or you have mental illness. But in reality, there's a gradation, right? It's a fluid transition, right? From being mentally well to being mentally unwell. And everybody experiences periods of mental unwellness, whether it's, profound and for long periods of time, or whether it's simply, states of, severe depression because you've been through something. And so when we think about this, we then kind of have constructed about a government approach to this, where if you meet this definition of illness, and then you qualify for money, right, which then drives benefits. But then you get a stigma because now you have the money to treat the thing that makes you hopefully will feel better, but you're stigmatized because now you are mentally ill. And so it's kind of a perverse notion, because then it actually runs full cycle and it prevents people from getting the help they need because there's this stigma attached to it. And it's another way, I think, of really reinforcing this kind of industrial, pharmaceutical, healthcare kind of, function that doesn't actually solve the problems. So I think we need to fundamentally rethink all of that stuff. And so as a result, when you think about substances and substance abuse, we also have to recognize that we are in a country that is very moralistic that likes to draw bright lines, that likes to blame people who use substances which change your persona or affect your mental state as being bad. Like there's something bad about avoiding pain or having to escape from mental pain, right? That actually all of us need escape. And so, what do we do? Like the one legal form of escape is alcohol,
Yeah.
right? And that's really almost worse than any other form.
Absolutely.
So we have to get away from a society that is punitive to people who are using substances, and that addiction is actually an illness, not the substance, it's the addiction. So but also people can live decent lives where they contribute to society and manage their addictions too. So all of these paradigms are really changing. And so that's what I bring to the table. And so as mayor, we would have a much more relaxed and expansive view about what it means to be healthy, and much more of an integrated view toward being healthy, starting at the roots. So do we make sure people have housing security and food security, to have access to quality education, to be able to get jobs and know they have an economic future ahead of them, so they can see the light at the tunnel, end of the tunnel, so they can have something to orient themselves to. I think those things are like the basic things that society has an obligation to provide people.
I love that you mentioned that, because it's a very fundamental thing that we overlook. It's something, those elements and that ability to have those basic things, housing, food, enough money to take care of our families and our children, access to jobs, access to be able to even do that and provide for our families. Those are all basic needs that really, we kind of tend to overlook, and we don't normally associate the stressors that really do affect our overall mental stability, and really how much stress and pressure that we have. And I know stress is actually the #1 killer in the nation. It accounts for all of the heart problems and much of the mental breakdowns, and that is definitely something that our society has somehow geared us all up to experience. Is just so much stress. But I agree with that. Definitely addressing the fundamentals is key,
Right.
and education is so important, especially as we navigate through this growing cannabis industry. It's very important. I know, Mike, you had a very personal story as well, one with your father that really touched me, and it was another perspective of how important cannabis is, and how to integrate it properly, and respect it, so that everybody has access to it, and a real industry that they can strive to work in. Mike, would you mind sharing your perspective on cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the segue. Art, when you were talking about the stigma, and I think this is something that, as a Korean American or just Asian American in general, we're told this is extremely bad. Stay away from it at all costs. And the final 2 weeks of my father's life, he had an attempted suicide that I saw firsthand, and that really triggered a response from me that really traumatized all of us that experienced it. And to see my father, this rock marine, this guy that was made of armor as I grew up, and do not mess with this guy. He's gangster as it comes. Like, this guy was so frail and fragile that he had so much pain, he had to try to take his own life. And at that moment, I wondered, the final 2 weeks of his life was, in my mind, was marred by a lot of pain, a lot of suffering that could have been rectified if we did. Why not explore cannabis? Why not? And if we had a few moments of laughter, we knew that he wasn't in pain, and he didn't have 20 to 30 medications to rectify the pain levels. What would have that experience been like for us? I feel a part of me has been robbed because that experience is now marred by a negative experience for us. And that trauma lasts a lifetime for me. It will. And I wonder, if cannabis was there and if he didn't have that stigma, what would that have been for him? And that memory of him smiling is worth it to me. And regardless of what society says, I think we need to listen to people like Priscilla and really understand that there are different ways to rectify these pains, or some of these things that we were talking about as well, like this mental illness. We all have it. How do we start remedying this? And I love the position that all of you guys are in. And the story is very personal to me, of course. And the cannabis industry, being kind of told that this is bad. I'm very open-minded about everything, and this is another thing that I would fight for. It's not just a thing; it's a movement. It's a way of life. It's a choice. It's a freedom that we all should have. And so, I'm so honored that you're standing behind this and having people like Ms. Artis and Ms. Priscilla here just standing up for us and really pushing the agenda. So, thanks for listening to my story, guys.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mike. And these are the people, these are the patients, these are the soldiers and the leadership behind, pushing for the cannabis agenda. It's not the villainous propaganda that we've heard all before. I mean, when my grandfather, who was one who propelled me into this space, when he passed, it was unfortunate because he said that he would rather die than be a criminal and take cannabis. So it was harrowing, a harrowing experience. Art, I know that there are more things. There's a lot more things than cannabis to run one of the most important cities in the entire world. I would love to know, some other highlights about your leadership and what you're planning to bring to New York as the mayor.
Well, I think we can touch on some of those by by continuing to focus on cannabis. So, one thing that people don't understand about New York City, and actually probably most cities in the country, is that the largest employers actually are not the large companies. In New York City, 52% of employment came from small businesses. And actually 96% of those businesses are micro businesses, right? Businesses with fewer than 50 people. And 44%, nearly half of those businesses were founded and run by women, right? Ooh. So when we looked at what happened during COVID, when small businesses got no relief, when women were torn between having a job and making a living with all these economic pressures, or trying to help their children who were in remote learning, millions of women across the country left the workforce. And so in March, we had lost 30 years of women's economic progress in just a year.
Wow.
And so when we think about coming back out of this, we're going to have to think about small business. Because in New York City in the past 10 years, all the job growth came from small businesses. Big businesses were sending work to cheaper parts of the country and to other parts of the world that had lower labor costs. So small businesses are where it's at, but small businesses are also the fabric of our communities, right? So when people use this term, and they throw it around really loosely, but what does the fabric of our community mean? It means the people who live there, who are familiar sights on your street, the shops that are on your street, where you can walk in and they say, would you like the usual, right? The parks and the playgrounds that are your community gathering points, right? This is what it means to have a community fabric. And small businesses, by the way, include the arts, which are a generator of $100 billion worth of economic activity in New York City, and employ over 100,000 people in the arts industry. Wow. And so, all these things are intersectional, they're all interconnected, and that's what is so interesting and cool about this. So one thing about cannabis, I apply the lens that I have from working in tech. Now, I've been part of every wave of technology since 1985. When I wrote my thesis at Yale, I wrote it on a typewriter. And then when I went to my first job, I used a computer and I learned how to do spreadsheets and databases. And then I was there in the city in the corporation counsel's office when we did the transition from terminal mainframe to PC-based LANs and relational databases. And then I was there when everybody shifted to open source, and then to agile and extreme programming, then to product-centered, user-centered design. So what cannabis is another wave of innovation. And this is a wave that's been held back by law, not by technology, but by law. And so now that we've opened the floodgates to this potential economic activity, the biggest risk is that the venture capitalists, who are almost all white and male, are going to swoop in and fund startups who are white and male to take advantage of this economic opportunity. We have a responsibility to have restorative justice that we have had with the decades of stop and frisk, of broken windows policing, of sending people to prison for the possession of small amounts of drugs, and especially a drug, something like cannabis. We have decades of restorative justice to do. We have seen whole communities devastated by this. So it would be injustice if we didn't offer those licenses first to people who had gone to prison and paid the price for this wrong legal policy. And then to think about how we nurture and grow them. So I'll say one thing that people know, and everybody knows, that in communities that lack economic opportunity and education, that drug dealing is entrepreneurship. It is how you get ahead. You are a better marketer. You can be a better packager. You can be a better distributor. Like we know that people who market and sell illegal drugs form sophisticated supply chains, right? And they have territories, and they market, and they know how to do their product. So how do we take the skills for something that was deemed illegal, identify the people who had gone to jail for doing this, identify the people who could be the great entrepreneurs in cannabis, and then help them grow in a legitimate business? I've started 2 incubators in this city, and I believe incubation is the way to go. So my proposal is founded on the idea that we need to have, marijuana, cannabis incubators in New York City, that we have to identify these entrepreneurs, give them educational support, economic support, investment, actually set them up with the full supply chain for cannabis, from growing the plants to harvesting, processing, packaging, distributing them, and then back it with all the financial requirements that you need to make sure that you're running a solid business that other people will invest in, and then bring the investors in and the advisors so that these folks have the best chance possible to be successful and to build wealth for themselves. And then with the taxes that we get from this, we need to ensure that the taxation goes to benefit the communities most harmed.
I was saying that you said that perfectly. Being from this space and working in this industry for the last 2 decades, it's been quite the challenge, if you can imagine, transitioning into a legal regulated market. Your proposal of how to support that through incubation or an incubation-like program that is really governed by, the leadership there in New York is critical. It's really key, because it's not just about opening the floodgates and stating these things. It's also enforcing and having a hand in that, so that there isn't predatory lending, that there isn't predatory relationships where even if they have and partner with a minority, that VC doesn't just write in the bylaws and take over when this, that, or basically when you sneeze, right? They can take over your company. And I think that is really great. I don't feel that is overreach. I feel that period of time, especially as we are being able to educate, bring in the industry, open opportunities, that is something that's very much needed, especially for those that have been the most negatively impacted by this prohibition of cannabis. Sephida, I would love to know your thoughts, being a powerful woman of color in New York, I know you shared stories with me about growing up there in Brooklyn. How do you feel about his plan, and what else would you add to it?
I definitely think that it's a great plan to start with. In order for the industry to be equitable for communities that have been disproportionately affected by prohibition and the war on drugs, there definitely needs to be economic empowerment. There needs to be initiatives and programs in place to help them get set up to be able to create those businesses, be able to create jobs by empowering them to take advantage of the opportunities that are in the space, whether they're going to be on the plant touching side or for ancillary services. I do believe that ancillary services are going to be a huge opportunity in the market, because you think about what's currently necessary in regular industries is going to be necessary in the cannabis industry as well. So when you hear of plans being made for a certain percentage of tax revenue to go towards social equity, as well as reinvestment in these communities, there needs to be a clear plan as to how that is going to be allocated and how to get the community involved with that process. So I think his plan is definitely a great way to start. And I think the community engagement piece is going to be key in making sure that you're able to convey that message and allow the community to tell you, what they need, how they've been impacted, and some of the things that they have in mind that will better their community as a whole.
Wonderfully said, Sephida. I know that we're about to end our session here. We have about 5 more minutes. Mike, I know that you have also had interest in this space, coming from a creative lens and your professional background. How do you feel that the cannabis industry and what Art's plan is, how do you feel that's going to land on people from the arts community and people from color?
It's tremendous. I can only speak from my Asian American perspective, and having friends of every race and nationality. It's an amazing time that we're in, because 20 years ago it was illegal, and I knew friends that were dealing and et cetera, just to make it and just to survive. And so those stories are real. Our stories and the way were brought up are real. And to have restorative justice, and Art, your plan is amazing. I love the steps. I love when you look at your jail system as an example, you're treated really horribly inside the jail system, and then when you're let out, you're just supposed to fend for yourself with this marred record and go, hey, make a living and go give back to the community, even though we have handcuffs on you still when you're walking outside that jail. And so how do we restore that? By giving them training, giving them something that they should have had in the first place. So I think that's a beautiful thing to do. We restore our communities that way. We also give them hope. Something that when I grew up in not the most affluent neighborhoods, we didn't have inspiration. We didn't have an art chain that we looked at that we can go, hey, he represents who I look like. And it's an amazing thing, because now you have the heart to kind of change this narrative and to restore that justice back into our community. And like what Ms. Artis like wisely said, this is just the beginning. And I know that we have a lot of work to do, but I think this is an amazing first step. And using, this is like an act of kindness. This is some neat place. I hate to shamelessly plug this in, but Art, what you're doing is an act of kindness for the community. And this is why we started Some Neat Place to begin with. This is why Priscilla is an advisor for us, because the kindness really resonates and your actions are speak louder than words. And one of the things that, you know, as we end here, you know, the thing that we initially talked about, Art, where you're saying that, you know, you want to do disruptive things. It doesn't really matter about if you win this race or not. It's about giving back to New York. And I thought your heart was in the right place. It's back in the communities, which it should be. And I think that if we need to let the entire world know that this is what politicians should do, how they should act and how they lean into their communities. I think it's a beautiful thing. So using the creative lens, your background, parting with us and being humble just to be here and speaking with you, I can't wait for what we're going to be able to do tomorrow with the creative lens in hand.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. I want to share one last fact for everyone that is going to be watching this and why social justice is so very important and should be at the top of everyone's priorities. For the same crimes that people have been arrested for, both POC and non-POC, the jail rate is 3 to 16 times more for those that are of color for the same exact crime. They went to jail for the same exact crime when they got arrested. So that is insane. 3 to 16 times more. That's something that we have a chance to correct. It's something that should be important to every stakeholder in the cannabis industry, whether you are a patient, a caregiver, or you know, someone who is making money in this space. Good for you. This should be something at the top of your priority. So I'm going to end this. Thank you so much, Art, Chang, AKA Cheech Chang, AKA our vote and our pick for a New York City mayoral candidate. We really love what you're about, Art. Thank you so much for spending time with us at Some Neat Place. Thank you, Sephida Artis, National Director for the National Cannabis Party. Thank you, Mike, for putting this all together. And we wish you a really great rest of your race, Art.
Thank you so much. And anybody who's curious can see my cannabis plan at chang.nyc.
Yay. I gotta get you some stuff.
Okay. All right. So wonderful
to
see you. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for all of your support, and I'll see you after Tuesday.